Good morning. Today we're going to talk about rounding, and in my class I teach the kids a little bit differently about how to round. So I want them to be able to tell me what are your two options for choices anyhow. And if you can't get to that point, then I know that I need to go back even further. So basically starting at the very beginning in first grade and maybe early second grade, you reviewed or were taught that the single digits you could round from either, you could say they're either closer to 0 or they're closer to 10. And so you learned that 4 or less, you let it rest with the 0. And if it was a higher number like 5 or up, you rounded up. Excuse me. Okay, so in that same idea, that was our single digits. And if you noticed, we started with 0 because that was our first option. Excuse me again. So if you're looking at the rest of this page, you're thinking, why does it have double 0, triple 0, quadruple 0, all the way up? You have to know that that is there on purpose because sometimes when we round, we have to choose the 0 choice. And we'll explain that a little later as we get an example. All right, so the other thing I want you to notice is that at the end of each column, you've done the 10th number, and the 10th number tells you what place you're going to end up in. And if you remember on that base 10 place value information, I explained that every time you get to 10, that's when you have to regroup. But it always tells you that the 10th 10 or the 10th 100 or whatever, it's going to share with you, oh, that's the next place value over. So the 10 at the end of the first column tells me I'm going into my tens. Then the tens end with 100 because 10 times 10 is 100. So you have 100, and then that goes into your thousands because you kept going 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000. I always say it's okay to say 1000 because you may have a number between 900 and 1000. And you think, well, you could call it 1000, but it could also be known as 1000. All right. Okay, so I want to look at how do we round and why is this going to help us in a little bit here. All right, so I'm going to move this over to the side to make it like that, I think. And all right. And this should be pretty good. So we kind of have a snapshot of our rounding information. And here we're going to actually practice rounding. So the first time I want you to round, I want you to actually round just a number that's 2 digits long. So let's do 57. Okay? If I wanted to round to the nearest 10, I would I would underline the 5 because it's in the tens place, and I would circle the digit to the right, which is the 7 that's in the ones place. Are there any numbers to the left of the underlined digit? No, there are not. So we don't have to do anything special with that. Now, if this was my answer line, that would be awesome. And you're thinking, well, but why do you have first choice, second choice? Because I expect you, and you don't have to write this, first choice, and then, and that's this one, and then second choice will be below the line. And we will box our decision, okay? All right, I'll make this a little bit more close up. All right, so, all right, what 10 starts with 5? Well, that's the place I'm in, so that's why I asked what 10. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to notice, oh, 50 starts with 5. So I'm going to put 50 down. But then my next question is, well, what's the next 10? And the next 10 is 60. And therefore, I put a 60 down. So you've got your two choices now, and now it's all about the circle digit, the 7 on that rounding hill. All right, so find 7. Well, 7's smack dab over here on the right side, the opposite side. So it looks like it's very close to the second choice. Therefore, if it's a 5 or up, we're going to move on up to the second choice. And so there means I will box my number 60, and that's my answer, my final answer. Now, if I was the teacher or the grader, I would say, wow, this student really understood what they were doing. I don't need to see the second choice and the first choice, but if I would see, wow, they underlined their tens place, so they knew they were rounding to the tens and they know where that is. They also knew that they had to circle the number to the 7 because it makes the decision. Then they were even able to give me 50 and 60. So they knew their choices, and because of the 7, they chose the 60 and boxed it in. So I know that's their final answer choice. All right. So let's do one in the hundreds, and I'm going to do that on purpose because I have taught the kids that you can use a squiggle line to help you remember. So let's say you had the number 342. And I want to round to the nearest 10 still. So my tens place is where the 4 is. I'm going to circle the digit to the right, which is the 2. And I'm going to squiggle line up and down anything that falls to the left of the underlined digit. Well, here's my answer line. And remember, my top choice will be my first choice, and the bottom line underneath the line will be my second choice. Well, what does the squiggle line mean? Well, the squiggle line means that the 3 is going to be on both answer choices. I can't forget it or I'll get the whole problem wrong. I may be able to round the 42, but if I don't have the 300, it'll be incorrect. So that means I'm going to put a 3 on top of my line for my first choice, and I'm going to put a 3 on the bottom line for my second choice. Then I'm going to go back to my tens and I'm going to ask that same question. What 10 starts with 4? And I'll think through my tens, or if you have this chart handy right now, you could say, oh, 40 starts with 10, is my 10 that starts with a 4. And what's the next 10? Well, it looks like it's 50. And therefore, I'll put 50 down. Now, the 2 makes the decision, so let's look at that hill. And where's the 2? It's under a 4, so it's 4 or less, so we're going to let it rest on the first choice. Therefore, I will box my top answer or my first choice. Does that make sense? I'm hoping so. All right, let's move to our thousands. What if I had the number, let's see, 2,844. And I said, well, let's round to my nearest 100. All right, let's underline the hundredths spot. Let's circle only the number to the right, the 4, in the tens place. And I'm going to squiggle line anything to the left of the underlined digit. If you noticed, I squiggled the thousands place and the comma. So on my answer line, I'm going to put 2, comma, 2, comma. Now I'm going to ask, oh, the underlined digit's the hundredths place. So what hundred starts with 8? I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say 800, or hopefully you know it off the top of your head. All right, 800. What's the next 100? Oh, it's 900. And so, therefore, I have to choose now. The 4 is going to make my decision. Let's go to the rounding hill. And let's choose the, let's see, the 4 is 4 or less, so let's go down to our first choice. And so I will box my first choice. All right. Now, you're still thinking, why do you have all those zeros on the tops of each of the columns? Well, let me explain. All right. I do this on purpose because sometimes you have to round a number where it's, like, for example, what if it was 1,054? And I need it to round to the nearest hundreds place. Well, sometimes numbers have zeros because zeros are numbers. And so I'm going to put my answer line down and I'm going to say, oh, well, I'll circle the digit to the right. That's the 5 in the tens place. Then I'll squiggle line and I will put a 1 comma on both answer choices because that was what was squiggled. Now, the 0 that starts with the hundreds place, if you understand, now you know why I'm taking 0, 0, 0. The next 100 is 100. It's a little tricky, but it does help. All right, so the 5 makes the decision. Is it going to be 1,000 or 1,100? And so I will look for the 5, and the 5 is at the top of the hill, and it's a 5 or more, so we'll move up 1 more to the second choice, and therefore I will box my second answer. Okay, now, one more thought. When I did the tens place, if you notice, the answers were tens. I have to have tens if I'm rounding to the nearest 10. The first number doesn't always have to be a 10, but the rest of it does if I'm rounding to the 10. So 340 is a 10. Even though it has numbers in the hundreds, it still ends in a 10. And here's my 50. Here's my hundreds. So when I round to the hundreds, I should see one of my hundreds at the end of my answer so that I know that I put it down right. You don't want to say 2840 because I'm not rounding to the nearest 10, I'm rounding to the nearest 100. And the same with this one. Let's do two more examples. I'll do a 10,000s place and a 100,000s place. So the 10,000s, let's say I have the number 72,463. All right, I want to round to the nearest thousands. So I'm going to circle the 4. And I'm going to squiggle line the 7. Here's my answer line. And I'm going to say, okay, I got to get that 7 in front of both of my choices. Oh, what thousand starts with 2? Oh, look over here, it's 2,000. So I'm going to put a 2, comma, 0, 0, 0. And what's the next 1,000? 3,000. And I'll put a 3, comma, 0, 0, 0. 4 makes the decision. If I go to my hill, a 4 or less lets it rest on our first choice, and I'll box my answer. All right, last one, let's do an example of 100,000. Let's do 503,246. And I want to round to the nearest 100. So I'm going to squiggle line everything to the left. Okay, that means on my answer line I need to see 503, comma, 503, comma. 2 is in the hundreds place. What 100 starts with 2? 200. What 100 comes after 200? 300. What's the choice? Oh, look, I didn't circle my digit to the right, so I did that really quick. The number is 4 or less. Let it rest on our first choice. I'll box my final answer, and now that I know what my final choice is. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you understand what I've done, and if you have questions, please ask, and maybe I can clarify even further. Have a great day, everybody.